So in our previous tutorial, we set it up so that when Bob clicks on the room, he goes out into this kingdom that we made. And we even put in some hedges to keep Bob in terms of boundaries. But there's a couple of problems here. One, it's boring. And two, where's the door that Bob came out of? So let's build Bob a house. Let's go to the kingdom. Okay, and let's add a sprite here. And we're going to call this one Bob House. And I'm going to use the cement block one that I have here, just because I think it's easy. Okay, so let's go ahead and drag this out. And this is a good time to also talk about precision using the properties menu. So we can click on an object and then click this button up here and bring up the properties menu. And we can get more precision that way. For example, I have very specific coordinates that I want to use for this tutorial. And I want my house to be at x309. So let's go ahead and put in 309. And I want my y value to be at 156. All right. Now I can also input the width and the height here as well. Sometimes you have to drag it out a little bit to get it going. But the width I want to be 185. 185. And the height I want to be 119. All right. Now we need to add a door. Let's go back to our sprites. And let's call this Bob House Doorway. And I've got a little door sprite that's 32 by 64 that I want to use. Here it is. And again, you can make all these in Paint 3D or MS Paint even, or anything you want. Let's drag this out, and I've got specific coordinates I want to use for this as well. For the door, I want that to be at 386. And I want it to be at Y210. Okay. So now we've got a little house here for Bob. What we ultimately want to do is we want to make it so that Bob can't move through the house, of course. So we're going to actually copy our collision up here. We can copy the whole thing, actually. Copy. Let's add an empty event, and let's paste it in. And we just need to change the hedges to Bob House. And here too, same thing. Change the hedges to Bob House. Now he can't walk through his house, right? But we do want something to happen when we go into the door here. So let's go back to our events here, and let's add a collision for the doorway. So let's go when Bob is in collision. Bob is in collision with Bob House Doorway. What do we want to happen? Well, for right now, let's just change the scene like we did in the other previous tutorial. We'll do quotation marks, main, and then we can sort of get a sense of what's going on here. Okay. All right. Now, I have a feeling I know why this happened. Sometimes you got to be careful. Right now, this is this gray part, the cement block, is collidable. But if that gray part is just a little bit past the door here, then Bob can never really collide with that door. So let's drag the doorway down just a little bit. See how it's almost too perfectly there? You can almost see gray there. Let's drag it down just a little bit. There we go. I bet that makes all the difference here. Now he can finally collide with the door. Whoops. Bob is sliding around. There we go. Okay, so we've made it now so you can go in and out of these spaces, but this is not how people enter a room, right? We don't go into a door and end up in the bathroom somehow, right? Unless it's the bathroom, but you know what I mean. So how do we make it so that Bob always ends up just outside the door. For that, we're going to use global variables, okay? So variables are just containers of information. And these containers have what are called scopes, right? We'll talk about scope later on too, but the scope of a variable is just how far it can be seen in a program. So you have object variables in GDevelop, and that's a very short scope, meaning it can only be seen in one object. That's it. So the variable would be between Bob and the house here, and that's it. Then you have what are called scene variables, right? And those variables can be, well, seen throughout this entire scene. So, well, eventually we're going to have multiple houses here. A scene variable can be utilized for like all those houses and whatnot. Then you have global variables. Global variables can be seen throughout the entire program. So throughout these tutorials, we're always going to be asking ourselves, where does our variable need to be seen? And the question we have for ourselves right now is, we're going to make two global variables that will always show Bob's position on any scene. Is that something that we want to be known throughout the entire project, the entire game? The answer is probably yes, right? And that's why we're going to go to Project Manager and make global variables. Now, I already started this, right? But I'll do it with you here as well. Let's go ahead and this is probably what you're going to be seeing. Let's click this button down here. Don't click this one right now. We'll talk about structures and things like that later on. Click this one right here. And let's make one called Bob pos x, and that just means Bob's x position. And then Bob pos y. Okay, let's hit apply. Now, what we're going to do with Bob pos x and Bob pos y is we're going to tell the software where to place Bob anytime we enter a scene. Okay, so the way we're going to do that is this way. Let's go to our kingdom events again. And right now, when Bob collides with the house doorway, we just change the scene. Instead, we're going to change the variable value of those two variables we made. So let's go here, variable, global variable. Remember, it's not a scene variable, it's a global variable. And the first one we're going to change is Bob pos x, and we're going to set that equal to, let's see, we're going into the main room, so I want him to be at about 716 for x, and then I'm going to copy this and paste it below, and then just change this to Bob pos y, and for the y value, I want it to be 527. So let's change the y value to 527. And we always have to think about execution order here. We don't want to change the scene and then load these variables. We want to load these variables first and then change the scene. Now you might be wondering, where did I get these values from? Well, I cheated. With Bob over here, right? Let me move this out of the way for a second. What I did is I placed Bob where I wanted him to be. So I had 527 or 716 it was, and then whatever the y value was, I put Bob here manually and then got those coordinates where I wanted him to be. And I'll do the same here as well to get the coordinates I want that are just outside the door. But first I'm going to do this because I want you to see what happens if you don't feed the correct coordinates here. Alright, so we've changed the value of our global variables, but now we have to tell main events, which is going to be loaded here, what to do with those. So let's go to main events, and I've got a comment here at the bottom that I made, right? I just clicked this button here and made a comment. And I'm going to say at the start of the scene, and let's add an event. And the event that we're going to do is we're going to choose scene at the beginning of the scene and then hit OK. Whenever we load this scene, it's going to do this first and trigger whatever we put here one time, okay? And what we want to do, we trigger here, is we want to change the position of Bob. So let's go to Common Actions. Let's go to Position here. And we want to change the position of an object, and that object is Bob. Right from the beginning, we want Bob to be right outside the door. So the X position, you may have already guessed, is going to be that global variable X that we created. So let's go up here, variable. Make sure you're picking the correct one. This is a global variable. Bob pos X, right, which we got from the previous scene, the kingdom scene. Let's copy that. And then for our Y value, we can paste this in and change this to Y. Now, when we enter this room, we do our preview from the kingdom. When we enter this room, Bob should be right outside the main door. Let's see if we did this correctly. There he is. Now, when I go through this door, however, Bob's not going to be on the other side because we haven't coded it the other way. See? So let's code the other way now. Let's go to our main event. Let's go to our doorway collision, and let's do the same thing that we did on the other side. Let's do add action. We want to change a global variable. We want to change Bob pos X equal to, and I've got the numbers here. For the kingdom, it's going to be X387. All right, and then we can copy and paste this and change this to Y. And the Y value I wanted was 282. Whoops, wrong one. Make sure you got the Y value correct, 282. And again, we want this to, we want to think about order here. Let's change our X position first, then the Y position, then change the scene. But again, that's only half. If you recall, we had to do something on this end too, right? We had to create this at the start of the scene, at the beginning of the scene code here. Well, we can actually just copy this whole thing. See, you can click on certain events and copy just that, right? Or you can click in the gray areas and copy the whole thing. We're going to do that. And let's go ahead and add our empty event here. Paste it in. Let's get rid of our little empty one here. Now, we should be able to go back and forth. We'll talk about why Bob started up there on the left in a second. There he is. There he is. So he might be a little bit too close to the door here, which is why he's doing this sort of blinking thing. So let's move Bob down just a little bit here. Let's alter his X position here for the kingdom. So not in this one. We want to alter it in a main. You add Y in order to move him down a little bit. Let's move him down and see if that helps. We're going to talk about why he's up there too in a second. Much better. Yep. Okay. So let's address why Bob was up there kind of freaking out a little bit. This up here in this upper left point is 0, 0. 0x, 0y. When we created our global variables, these are empty. In gdevelop, when they're empty, they default to zeros. So, given that we're likely to start in our main room, we can hard code these values for the main room, which is 716, 527, so that when we load our main values, hit apply, Bob will always start right by the door in the main room. So watch. There he is. Okay. We got a little bit of a flickering going on over here. But that'll get cleaned up outside of the preview. You'll see. All right, so when we preview this, as we've been doing, you see he comes right out and right out the side of the door. So now we've learned how to use global variables in order to create, in order to sort of set Bob's position in a given scene.